Hello, friends of Oak Hills. This is Pastor Dale coming to you with our weekly video Touchpoint. Today is Thursday, February 9th, 2023. I continue my series on a few of my favorite adversative conjunctions. And today we are looking at Micah chapter 3, verse 8. I love adversative conjunctions because they exalt the power and grace of God by uniting two opposing statements that present seemingly impossible scenarios. Let me highlight a few of my favorites. I preached on this text in Micah 3 in our recent Advent sermon series. I love the contrast highlighted by the use of the adversative conjunction. This one, I believe, impacts us on a very relevant way. Let me lay out the context. Micah served as a prophet between 740 and 700 BC. The Jews had been split into two nations for nearly 200 years at this point. The northern kingdom of Israel had long endured under the leadership of godless kings. Most prominent was Ahab and his wife Jezebel, who had multiple confrontations with Elijah. In spite of their utterly godless culture, Israel enjoyed stability and prosperity in the mid-8th century BC. The southern kingdom of Judah swayed back and forth under godless and godly kings. Micah began his ministry shortly after King Uzziah died. Uzziah reigned for 52 years in Judah. So both Judah and Israel were enjoying political and economic stability when Micah began his ministry. And yet, Micah opens his prophecy by saying, "Behold, the Lord is coming out of his place and will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth. The mountains will melt under him and the valleys split open. Like wax before the fire, like waters poured down a steep place." Chapter 1, verse 3 and 4. Why all the doom and gloom when both Israel and Judah were enjoying relative stability and prosperity? Micah explains immediately in the following verse, "All this for the transgression of Jacob and for the sins of the house of Israel." What is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? And what is the high place of Judah? Is it not Jerusalem? In spite of the prosperity, spiritual decay had deeply corrupted both nations, and God was raising up the Assyrian Empire to carry out his judgment on his people. In chapter 3, Micah calls out the heads and the rulers of the land. They did not carry out justice. They hated the good and loved the evil. They devoured the people. They proclaimed false messages. They were greedy for gain through bribery. The spiritual decay of the land trickled down from the top leaders of the land. This is where the adversative conjunction shines brightly as an alternate path. Micah says in chapter 3, verse 8, "But as for me, I am filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord, and with justice and might, to declare to Jacob his transgression and to Israel his sin." Micah understood the importance to stand apart from the corrupt leaders and culture that engulfed the nations around him. But he was also humble enough to acknowledge that this was not of his own strength or doing. The power to stand apart came from the Spirit of the Lord. By God's strength, Micah would endure in the dark place, heralding the truth about sin, justice, and God himself. What about us? The people of God will always live in a land corrupted by spiritual decay. No amount of prosperity or stability can guarantee that we can relax. Like Micah, we also need to make the conscious decision to humbly rely on the strength of the Lord to stand apart. Will you say with Micah, "No matter how dark the darkness becomes, but as for me, I am filled with power from the Spirit of the Lord"? Touch on a few highlights this week in the life of Oak Hills. This Sunday, we return to our series in the book of Ephesians. I'm jumping into chapter 1, verse 7 through 10, and I'm looking forward to the sermon greatly. As Paul says here in verse 7, "In Christ we have redemption through his blood." That's a wonderful text to just talk about the riches of the gospel. And I'm looking forward to that. And I hope you are praying and looking forward to our worship together on Sunday morning. We want to remind you to continue to pray for our missionaries of the month. This month is John and Tricia Dunning, serving with RUF on the K-State campus. Lift them up in their prayer and their outreach to the college campus, the students on that campus this year. And then for our women, the glamping trip is coming up in 3 short weeks. They do ask for an RSVP by this Saturday, February 11th. So if you are interested or on the fence and thinking about this trip, please reach out to Susanna Stagmeyer and let her know where you're at, and so that they can make their final plans for that trip coming up in the first week of March. That's the highlights I'm going to touch on today. There's other things going on in the life of Oak Hills, regular Bible studies and gatherings, our youth group events, and Kid 360. But we encourage you to check out the Touchpoint, look at the bulletin, be a part of what's going on at Oak Hills. I pray that you have a blessed week. I look forward to seeing you soon. God bless.